This quick episode of Gators Breakdown is ready to go. Talking about the Georgia Bulldog, former Georgia Bulldog, Brenton Cox, transferring to Florida. 2018 five-star Georgia signee Brenton Cox will transfer from Georgia to Florida, entered the transfer portal earlier this week, and has enrolled at the University of Florida. We'll talk about that, kind of what it means for both Florida and Georgia, and the rivalry there for those two SEC East rivals. I'm the host of Gators Breakdown, David Waters. You can find me on Twitter at GatorDave_SEC. And some big news, of course, today with the transfer of one Brenton Cox to Florida. Hey, this happened pretty quick. He's earlier this week, kind of Sunday night, Monday, made his intentions known to leave Georgia. Was on campus and practice at Florida on Thursday, and practice on Friday with the Gators. So, the Gators lost the only 5 stars on the roster when CeCe Jefferson and Martez Ivey graduated. So Florida gets an unexpected one here through the transfer portal. Go back to Brenton Cox, and he was the nation's 23rd overall prospect coming out of Stockbridge High School, according to the 24/7 Sports Composite. Finished as the number 2 strong side defensive end in the 2018 class, number 5 player in the state of Georgia. As a freshman at Georgia, 13 to 14 games played, 20 tackles, 2 tackles for a loss, a sack, 3 pass breakups. Georgia's going to lose at least a quality depth piece here and a potential starter. He was in a battle with incoming freshman Nolan Smith and junior college transfer Jermaine Johnson. Those guys had good springs there. So, he was kind of fighting for some reps there in fall ball, and maybe had something to do with some disagreement with the coach's staff, Kirby Smart there at Georgia. Kind of stems from also a run-in with the law back in April when he was arrested prior to spring practice on misdemeanor substance charges. Marijuana was found in his dorm room. He was the 6th player arrested in a 6-week span at Georgia. And that rule infringement from him was expected to result in a 1-game suspension there at Georgia for the upcoming season. So as we said, 20 tackles as a backup last season. Played in the SEC championship game against Alabama after DeAndre Walker got hurt in that game. And if you go back and look at Cox's high school highlights and his last season at Georgia, you can see a lot of speed and quickness that he plays with at 6'4", 250 pounds. This is a kid that has potential just to live in the backfield. There's still some stuff to work on that's expected with a kid that was playing in his first season last year. He can use some training and reps and holding contain on the line. His last game with Georgia in the Sugar Bowl against Texas, he accounted for 6 total tackles. 3 of those were solo. Probably the way it's looking, won't be eligible for the 2019 season. You never know with the NCAA and what they can do here. Florida and him decide to seek a waiver here. But it'd be a while to get acclimated with a new defense. He'd be more of an extra this season. I don't think you rush. I really don't think you try to get him eligible this season. I don't think the decision would happen fast. He'd have to get acclimated with the defense. He wouldn't, to me, even attempt to be ready, somewhere midpoint in the season. I don't necessarily think you need him this year. He would be an extra. With what Florida already has with Jabari Zuniga, Jonathan Grenard, Jeremiah Moon, Zachary Carter in those buck and strong side defensive end roles, with Cox's versatility and his size at 6'4", 250, he can line up at either position in certain looks and be an every down player. So you'll likely see him next season on the field at the same time with a lot of potential with Andrew Chatfield, Lloyd Summerall, Chris Bogle, Mahmoud Diabate. With that group and Brenton Cox in that group, I tell you, that has all the makings of harassing quarterbacks for years to come at those rush-in, buck, defensive end positions for the Gators. So 2 more things about this. And one speaks to Mullen here, is finding a way to build a roster to compete. And Mullen has effectively hit the transfer portal in doing that. Wide receivers, Trevon Grimes, Van Jefferson, Defensive lineman Adam Schuler. They were big and looking to be big contributors this coming up season. Us as fans are high on those transfers, and they have really set the roster up to make a run this season. Well, Mullen does it again here with Cox, and the roster's better for it. And this is one from rival Georgia. I'm not going to sit here and make it sound like Florida stole one from Georgia. That's not the case here. That's not what happened here. There was an agreement to part ways with Cox and the Georgia staff, and he was just going to transfer. And Florida was on the phone quick, made some calls, and that brings me to my next point. Just because he transfers to Florida, this is one more event in the recent events between Florida and Georgia. Last year's top 10 matchup, hard-fought game, spilled over into recruiting, a lot of trolling in the offseason. Georgia came hard after defensive back eventual commit for the Gators, Kyer Elam. Florida won that battle, even though Georgia hired defensive back Charlton Warren. The Carson Beck recruitment, where it looked like Florida was in the running, really good, in good shape to get Beck's commitment, only for him to choose Georgia. Then we get the spring game attendance joke from the Florida side, and then the fans going back and forth on Twitter all off season. This rivalry has taken another huge step this off season, and this is just the latest event in what surely will be talked about the next couple of seasons here. So this Florida Georgia rivalry will be ratcheted up. Of course, when the game is played, coming up in November this year, and then next year, even though he doesn't play, this storyline will be brought up in the game to come in a couple months. And then next year, when he does play, it'll be brought up again, saying how Georgia's his former team, and he played a season there and goes to, Georgia's biggest rival. So a lot of storylines between Florida and Georgia this offseason. This is just one more to keep the hard feelings going back and forth here. So, look, it's he's not needed for this season. If he somehow gets a waiver, it would have to be really soon. But like I said, I think you're kind of forcing the moment there. He's not needed. You'd be forcing him in. Let him sit. Let him learn the defense. Let him get used to Nick Savage. And that's not a shot on Georgia's strength and conditioning or whatever. I'm just saying, let him get used to Nick Savage. Let him get used to working out. Let him get used to the defense. Let him see what Todd Grantham likes to do. Todd Grantham was instrumental in this recruitment here. They're selling him on that position that we know so well, where Ja'Kai Polite was able to, become a force last season, kind of out of nowhere. We knew the potential that he had there, and we could look for Grenard and Zuniga to kind of bolster that up. Jeremiah Moon's another guy, much like in the Ja'Kai Polite role. We talk about the potential there, or we're talking about the potential going into last season for Polite. Well, Moon's kind of in that same mold, so we see the potential there. So there was a lot to sell Cox here about being able to come in and be a force in this Todd Grantham defense. So, this offseason for the Gators has been a crazy one. There's been some ups, there's been some downs, recruiting along with that, transfers from Chris Steele to Jalen Jones, and you get another one here on the positive side for the Gators. Hopefully it's a fresh start for Cox. He did have some off-field issues there at Georgia in the spring, and I know there's a lot of talk of off-field stuff with Mullen and the prevention of sexual violence in players. And I said it before on Twitter this week, there's 5 incidents. Well, 4 of those guys are gone. And we'll see what happens with John Huggins and the stories that's coming out there. So a lot of publicity out there about the way Mullen runs a program. And of course, you'll probably have some people bring up that Cox has some off-field issues and he's going to Florida and all that. Whatever. I said Mullen, I know for a fact, does what he can do to prevent the issues that were, the domestic violence issues, violence against women there at Florida. What more can you want him to do? Also, after the fact, with those guys that have been questioned, those guys that have had those issues are no longer on campus. So, like I said, we'll see what happens with John Huggins. Later as we know, still not practicing with the Gators. And we'll see where it goes from there. But with Cox's issues, I'm sure it'll be brought up out there somewhere. But big pickup for the Gators. As I said, get a 5-star back on the roster. Not one particular player is going to make a difference or anything like that, but still good to get those type of players on the roster, and one that's not at Georgia anymore that will keep that rivalry pretty strong as we move forward. Talk about closing the gap, talking about making the roster better. Mullen's done very well through the transfer market and hits another one here with Brenton Cox. So that'll do it. As I said, quick, short episode, quick update there. It's a Friday night, crazy work week there. So, kind of just going to rest up. We've had some opponent previews on the guys. You've probably listened to the FSU and Miami one so far. And now going to start the SEC part of that. Will Miles and I have recorded it. It will be out sometime Sunday, Monday. We'll see what kind of goes along there, but we'll preview Kentucky, Tennessee, Auburn, LSU, a lot of research there, and kind of previewing the first part of the SEC schedule for the Gators. So be on the lookout for that on Gators Breakdown YouTube channel, all the podcast platforms out there as well. So as I said, quick episode. Brenton Cox, former 5-star that was at Georgia, is now a Florida Gator, and we'll look forward to when he's on the field. I'm the host of Gators Breakdown, David Waters. You can find me on Twitter at GatorDave_SEC. Guys and girls out there, thanks for listening to this episode of Gators Breakdown.